late 2016, the Australian government adopted a new catchphrase to help guide its humanitarian programming. It's simple enough and has already been used by many other organisations. And yet, it represents a significant change for the South Pacific region. That phrase, if not, why not? If not cash, why not? Cash transfer programming describes assistance that provides either cash or vouchers directly to individuals and families in need. It is usually contrasted with the provision of in-kind relief supplies to those affected by crises. The story I'm going to tell is about the Pacific region, where we've seen very little cash transfer programming to date. In mid-2015, regional consultations were held in Auckland in preparation for the World Humanitarian Summit. The Pacific consultations uncovered and documented many valuable insights into a part of the world that is often overlooked. One of the most surprising of these insights was that many stakeholders were extremely hesitant about the use of cash-based approaches in the Pacific. Levels of understanding, support for, and actual usage of cash transfer programming were all much lower in the Pacific than anywhere else. The World Humanitarian Summit consultations found that some Pacific government representatives were afraid. They were afraid that providing cash would undermine community self-reliance, kinship ties, and traditional coping mechanisms. Also raised were concerns about contradicting local customs, enabling corruption, and reinforcing gender inequalities. As you would know, most Pacific Island countries are remote and isolated, with a small population living on a very limited landmass. Other common features include markets that are often not well integrated, high subsistence levels, low individual purchasing power, and the challenge for businesses of enormous distances both between and within countries. What's more, the Pacific is often described as one of the least banked regions in the world. It only has a very small range of financial service providers. These attitudinal and operational concerns combined seem to suggest that the Pacific is different and that cash-based approaches might not be feasible. But then, in February 2016, Cyclone Winston hit Fiji. It was the largest tropical cyclone ever recorded in the Southern Hemisphere. 44 lives were lost, 30,000 homes were damaged or destroyed, and around 2/3 of the population of Fiji was affected. The government of Fiji requested international assistance. Many countries, including Australia, responded willingly. But the government of Fiji also did something else. It mobilised its existing social protection systems to respond to those affected by the disaster. It used cash to respond. The Fiji government allocated almost 20 million Fiji dollars to be used as social protection payment top-ups. Within a month of the cyclone, all existing beneficiaries of Fiji's social protection systems received an additional one-off cash transfer payment to support their recovery. This was provided regardless of whether they lived in a directly affected area or not. The government of Fiji also allocated an additional 70 million Fiji dollars to kickstart a hardware voucher scheme to help those whose homes had been damaged or destroyed. 3 months later, in June 2016, the Fiji Bureau of Statistics, the World Bank, and the Australian government teamed up to conduct an impact evaluation on the use of cash-based approaches to respond to Cyclone Winston. This evaluation has greatly helped to build the evidence base for cash transfer programming, its usage across the entire Pacific. It found that Fiji's cash-based response to Cyclone Winston was rapidly implemented and clearly targeted, that it helped affected families cope, and that households acted rationally when using the additional funds they received. In parallel to the efforts to learn from the Cyclone Winston response, the Australian government funded the Cash Learning Partnership to undertake the first feasibility scoping study on cash transfer programming in the Pacific. In September 2016, this study found that cash would be feasible to use in response to humanitarian crises in many parts of the Pacific. It made recommendations for how practitioners and decision makers might change to address the concerns raised by those specificities and challenges. Australia is now acting on these recommendations, including through changes to strategic policies, programming guidelines, and international commitments. Most importantly, however, the overarching approach to humanitarian response programming has changed. Discussions around humanitarian responses now begin with one simple question. If not, why not? If not cash, why not?
Like my mother, when she went to school, it was right after the war. The whole country was destroyed. And the biggest obstacle for the children to go to school was that they didn't have proper shoes or clothes to go to school, especially in the winter time. And luckily, UNICEF brought in loads and loads of clothes to Finns so that the children could go to school. And even my mother. And she then later came as a teacher.
Neuroscience research shows that violence and neglect scar the growing brain. The adversity and trauma experienced during wars and emergencies affect children's memory and their ability to reason, to solve problems, and to express themselves creatively and emotionally. In other words, it affects their ability to learn.